Officer Derek Sullivan had been with the Charleston Police Department for 6 years when he walked up to a black man in a tuxedo and decided he was looking at a car thief. He was 29 years old, young enough to claim inexperience, but old enough to know that assumptions can destroy careers. One Saturday evening in the parking lot of the Magnolia Grand Hotel, he saw a well-dressed black man opening the door of a Mercedes SUV, and his mind immediately jumped to theft. The man was Judge Marcus Thompson, a 44-year-old federal judge for the United States District Court, and he was retrieving his suit jacket from his vehicle 30 minutes after marrying the love of his life. What Officer Sullivan did next, ignoring the tuxedo, dismissing the man's profession, and handcuffing a federal judge in front of 150 wedding guests, would cost the city $5.8 million, end Sullivan's career, and expose a police department that had ignored 8 previous complaints about this exact officer making the exact same assumptions about black people in expensive cars. A black man in his mid-40s, Judge Marcus Thompson, was standing beside his Mercedes SUV in a custom-tailored tuxedo, wedding ring still fresh on his finger. He'd just married Dr. Alicia Thompson inside the hotel ballroom. His federal judicial credentials were upstairs in his room. No crime, no theft, no suspicious behavior, just a groom getting his jacket from his own car. But Officer Sullivan saw him through a lens so warped by racial profiling that he couldn't imagine a black man in a tuxedo could actually own a Mercedes. Before we continue, if this is your first time here, please hit that like button and subscribe. Stories like these need to reach everyone. Your support helps us expose injustice and demand accountability. Now, let's get into what happened. The Magnolia Grand Hotel sits on the historic Charleston waterfront, a 5-story brick building with white columns and views of the harbor. Built in 1892 and renovated 3 times since, it represents old Charleston money meeting new Charleston luxury. The hotel caters to an upscale clientele: doctors, lawyers, business executives, politicians, old Southern families celebrating traditions that go back generations. Weekend rates start at $400 per night. Wedding packages run $30,000 and up. The hotel's reputation is built on discretion, elegance, and the kind of service that makes people feel like they've stepped back into a more refined era. It was 7:45 p.m. on a Saturday in late September. The weather was perfect: 75 degrees, clear skies, a light breeze coming off the water, carrying the salt smell of the harbor. Golden hour lighting painted everything in warm amber tones. The sun was setting over the water, turning the sky shades of orange and pink. Strings of Edison bulbs hung between the magnolia trees that lined the walkway, from the parking lot to the hotel entrance. The hotel's parking lot sat adjacent to the main building, separated by a row of century-old magnolia trees and decorative wrought iron fencing. About 60 vehicles filled the lot that evening: Mercedes, BMWs, Audis, Teslas, a few Porsches, even a vintage Rolls-Royce. The kind of cars you'd expect at a high-end wedding in one of Charleston's most exclusive venues. Valets in white jackets moved between vehicles. Security cameras monitored every corner. LED lights illuminated the walking paths. Inside the hotel's grand ballroom, 150 guests were celebrating the marriage of Judge Marcus Thompson and Dr. Alicia Thompson. The ceremony had concluded at 6:30 p.m. in the hotel's garden courtyard overlooking the harbor. Cocktail hour had just transitioned to dinner. A 7-piece jazz band played near the dance floor. Classics from Miles Davis and John Coltrane mixed with modern interpretations. Crystal chandeliers that had hung in that ballroom for 80 years cast soft light over everything. Round tables draped in ivory linens with gold accents filled the room. Centerpieces of white roses and magnolia blossoms sat on each table. The bar served top-shelf liquor: premium bourbon, expensive scotch, craft cocktails. Waiters in black vests and bow ties carried silver trays of appetizers: crab cakes, beef tenderloin, shrimp cocktail. The guest list read like a who's who of Charleston's legal and medical establishment. Federal prosecutors who'd worked with Marcus in the U.S. Attorney's Office. State judges who'd watched his career rise. Attorneys from the state's most prestigious firms. Physicians from the medical university, where Alicia practiced cardiology. City council members. A state senator. The mayor had sent his regrets, but his deputy was there. These were people who understood the law, who knew their rights, who had the education and resources to fight back when those rights were violated. The parking lot should have been the safest place in Charleston that night. It was well lit, visible from the hotel entrance, monitored by multiple security cameras, and filled with guests dressed in $3,000 evening gowns and custom tuxedos coming and going throughout the reception. This wasn't a dark alley or an isolated street. This was a luxury hotel hosting a federal judge's wedding reception. But for Officer Derek Sullivan, a black man standing next to a Mercedes in this parking lot could only mean one thing. And that assumption, that bias so deeply embedded it overrode every piece of evidence in front of him, was about to cost him everything. Judge Marcus Thompson had spent 22 years building a legal career that most attorneys only dream about. At 44 years old, he was one of the youngest federal judges in the Fourth Circuit, appointed to the United States District Court for the District of South Carolina 3 years earlier, after a nomination process that included extensive FBI background checks, Senate confirmation hearings, and recommendations from every major legal organization in the state. He'd grown up in North Charleston, the son of a postal worker and an elementary school teacher. His parents had saved for years to send him to private school. He'd graduated at the top of his class, earned a full academic scholarship to Duke University, and finished undergraduate studies with a double major in political science and economics. He'd been accepted to Yale Law School, where he served as an editor on the Yale Law Journal and graduated in the top 10% of his class. After law school, Thompson had clerked for a federal appeals court judge, then spent 8 years as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office, handling complex white-collar crime and public corruption cases. He'd prosecuted sitting state legislators, corporate executives, and organized crime figures. He'd won 47 of 51 trials. His colleagues called him thorough, fair, and unshakable under pressure. He'd left the prosecutor's office to join South Carolina's most prestigious law firm, where he made partner in 4 years, a near-record pace. He'd built a reputation as the attorney you wanted when everything was on the line. Corporations paid $700 per hour for his expertise. He'd argued cases before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals and had been scheduled to argue before the Supreme Court when his nomination to the federal bench came through. As a federal judge, Thompson presided over civil rights cases, federal criminal matters, and complex commercial litigation. He was known for meticulous legal reasoning, giving both sides a fair hearing, and writing opinions that other judges cited as examples of clear legal thinking. His peers respected him. Attorneys who appeared before him appreciated his preparation and fairness. But that Saturday evening, none of that mattered. Not his law degree from Yale, not his years as a federal prosecutor, not his appointment to the federal bench, not the Senate confirmation, not the robe he wore in court, or the gavel he used to call proceedings to order. Marcus Thompson had married Dr. Alicia Thompson at 6:30 p.m. She was a cardiologist at the Medical University of South Carolina, someone he'd met 2 years earlier at a charity fundraiser. They'd dated for 18 months before he proposed on a beach in Hilton Head. The wedding had taken a year to plan. They'd chosen the Magnolia Grand because Alicia had always dreamed of a waterfront ceremony. The ceremony had been perfect. His mother had cried. Her father had given a touching speech. Friends from law school, former colleagues from the U.S. Attorney's Office, fellow judges, and Alicia's medical school classmates had all attended. The cocktail hour had been elegant. Dinner was about to be served. Marcus had stepped outside around 7:40 p.m. to grab his suit jacket from his Mercedes. The ballroom was warm. He wanted the jacket for photos later. He'd told Alicia he'd be back in 5 minutes. He'd walked through the hotel lobby, exited through the main doors, and crossed the parking lot to his vehicle, a black Mercedes, GLE 450, he'd purchased 2 years earlier. He was still wearing his custom tuxedo, the one he'd had tailored specifically for this day. His wedding ring caught the parking lot lights. He'd used his key fob to unlock the vehicle, opened the rear door, and was reaching for his jacket on the back seat when he heard a voice behind him. Step away from the vehicle. Marcus Thompson had spent his entire adult life in courtrooms, analyzing evidence, questioning witnesses, and applying the law fairly. He understood procedure. He respected law enforcement, He'd worked alongside police officers for years as a prosecutor. But in that moment, standing in a tuxedo next to his own car at his own wedding, Judge Marcus Thompson understood something that no law degree or judicial appointment could protect him from. To Officer Derek Sullivan, he was just another black man who didn't belong near an expensive car. Officer Derek Sullivan had been with the Charleston Police Department for 6 years. He'd joined the force at 23, right after finishing community college with an associate degree in criminal justice. He'd scored adequately on the entrance exam, passed the physical fitness test, and completed the police academy training program. His early evaluations described him as eager and rule-focused, but noted that he tended to make assumptions rather than gather facts. In 6 years, Sullivan had compiled a record that should have ended his career long before that Saturday night. 8 complaints. All 8 involved allegations that he'd targeted black motorists, detained black pedestrians without cause, or made arrests based on racial profiling rather than actual criminal behavior. Complaint 1. A black attorney driving a BMW was pulled over for suspicious driving patterns. The attorney had been driving 5 miles under the speed limit on his way home from court. Sullivan had kept him detained for 40 minutes, searching the vehicle without consent, finding nothing. Complaint 2. A black physician was stopped while jogging in a residential neighborhood. Sullivan claimed he matched the description of a burglary suspect. The physician had been wearing running clothes, had his house key and phone in a running belt, and lived 2 blocks away. The burglary suspect was described as 6 feet tall and heavyset. The physician was 5'8" and 160 pounds. Complaint 3. A black family was detained at a shopping center parking lot. Sullivan claimed their vehicle matched a reported stolen car. The family's vehicle was a silver Honda Accord. The stolen vehicle was a black Ford Fusion. Different make, different model, different color. Complaints 4 through 8 followed the same pattern: black professionals, expensive cars, or upscale neighborhoods, detained or arrested based on Sullivan's assumptions rather than evidence. A real estate developer accused of loitering outside his own office building. A college professor detained for looking suspicious while loading groceries into her Lexus. A tech entrepreneur arrested for car theft while sitting in his Tesla waiting for his wife. Every complaint ended the same way: insufficient evidence, not sustained, or case closed after Sullivan completed bias training. His supervisors noted in his file that he needed to work on community relations and avoiding assumptions. But those notes never translated into real consequences. He remained on patrol. He kept his badge. He kept making the same assumptions. The pattern was obvious. Derek Sullivan saw black people in spaces he didn't think they belonged and assumed criminal behavior. Expensive car, stolen, nice neighborhood, trespassing, professional clothing, disguise. His bias was so deeply embedded that evidence couldn't penetrate it. That Saturday evening, Sullivan had been on routine patrol when a call came through dispatch around 7:35 p.m. A hotel employee at the Magnolia Grand had reported suspicious activity in the parking lot. Someone checking car door handles. The description was vague: male, dark clothing, moving between vehicles. Sullivan arrived at 7:43 p.m. and immediately began scanning the parking lot. His eyes moved past couples in evening wear walking to their cars, past a family loading a child into a car seat, past an elderly man in a suit jacket. Then he saw what his biased mind had been looking for: a black man standing next to an expensive SUV. Never mind the custom tuxedo. Never mind the wedding ring. Never mind that the man had used a key fob to unlock the vehicle. Never mind that a wedding reception was happening 50 yards away. Sullivan saw a black man next to a Mercedes, and his brain filled in the rest. Car thief. Probably has a criminal record. Probably dangerous. He didn't observe. He didn't assess. He didn't think. He reacted. And that reaction was about to collide with a federal judge who'd spent 22 years fighting for justice. Should officers with multiple complaints about racial profiling be removed from street patrol? Drop your answer below. Marcus turned around and saw a police officer walking toward him, hand resting on his weapon. The officer's posture was aggressive, defensive, ready for confrontation. His eyes were locked on Marcus with the kind of suspicion that comes from assumptions rather than observation. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "This is my car. I'm getting my jacket. We got a call about someone breaking into cars in this parking lot," Sullivan said, moving closer, his body language communicating threat. "Step away from the vehicle. Now." Marcus looked down at himself. Custom tuxedo tailored by Charleston's best clothier. Hand-tied silk bow tie, patent leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. Wedding ring reflecting the parking lot lights. Boutonniere still pinned to his lapel. Then back at the officer. The absurdity of the situation was almost surreal. "Breaking into cars. Officer, look at me. This is my wedding. I just got married an hour ago. That's my vehicle. I own it. The registration is in the glove compartment." Sullivan's expression didn't change. His eyes moved from Marcus's face to the Mercedes and back. "Sure it is. I've heard every story. Show me some ID. Right now." Marcus felt a familiar weight settling in his chest. He'd prosecuted cases exactly like this. He'd ruled on cases exactly like this from the bench. He knew the pattern. He understood what was happening, but knowing didn't make it easier. Understanding didn't make it less humiliating. "My identification is inside the hotel with my wife," Marcus said, keeping his voice level, calm, professional. The voice he used in court when dealing with unreasonable arguments. "Officer, I'm Judge Marcus Thompson, United States District Court for the District of South Carolina. My judicial credentials are in my hotel room. You can verify my identity with one phone call to the federal courthouse. You can verify this vehicle belongs to me with one call to the DMV. The vehicle registration is in the glove compartment. I have done nothing wrong." Sullivan actually laughed, a short, dismissive sound that communicated disbelief and contempt. "Right, and I'm the President of the United States. Hands behind your back, now." "Officer Sullivan," Marcus said, reading the name tag, his prosecutor voice fully engaged now. "Look at me carefully. I'm wearing a custom tuxedo. There's a wedding reception inside that hotel with 150 guests. My wedding reception. I walked out here 5 minutes ago to get my jacket from my vehicle. You can see the hotel entrance from here. You can walk inside right now and confirm everything I'm telling you. This is my vehicle, a 2022 Mercedes GLE 450. License plate SCJ 4479. Registered in my name. I am Judge Marcus Thompson, Federal District Court. You can verify all of this before this situation escalates. The only mistake here is you thinking I'm stupid enough to fall for whatever con you're running," Sullivan said, pulling out his handcuffs. "Turn around. Last warning." This is where assumptions become accusations. Officer Sullivan had arrived at the parking lot expecting to find a car thief. When he saw a black man next to an expensive SUV, his bias instantly confirmed what he'd already decided was true. The tuxedo became an elaborate costume. The wedding ring became a clever prop. The calm, articulate explanation became a sophisticated con. The claim of being a federal judge became the most audacious lie. Sullivan wasn't processing evidence. He was defending his initial assumption against every piece of information that contradicted it. Marcus knew he had a choice. He could escalate, demand to speak to a supervisor, refuse to comply, assert his judicial authority forcefully, or he could de-escalate, comply, and let this catastrophic mistake play out in front of witnesses. As a federal judge who'd spent 22 years in the legal system, he understood the power of documentation. He understood that sometimes the best strategy was to give someone enough rope. "Officer Sullivan," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority he used when controlling his courtroom, "I'm going to comply with your orders, but I'm telling you right now, clearly and unambiguously, you are making a serious mistake. I am Judge Marcus Thompson, United States District Court. That is my vehicle, registered in my name, insured in my name, purchased by me. This is my wedding. My wedding reception is happening inside that hotel right now, with 150 witnesses, including federal prosecutors, state judges, and attorneys who will testify to exactly what they're about to see. You're about to arrest a federal judge at his own wedding based on nothing but your assumptions." "Save it for booking," Sullivan said. "Hands behind your back. Final warning." Marcus turned around slowly and placed his hands behind his back. Sullivan grabbed his wrists roughly. Not the controlled hold of a professional arrest, but the aggressive grip of someone asserting dominance. He yanked Marcus's arms together hard enough to make Marcus wince. The handcuffs snapped on with excessive force. The metal was cold against Marcus's skin. The cuffs were tight, deliberately, punitively tight, the kind of tight that leaves marks. Marcus had handcuffed suspects hundreds of times as a federal prosecutor. He knew the difference between secure and sadistic. This was the latter. You're under arrest for attempted auto theft, trespassing on private property, and resisting an officer. I haven't resisted anything, Marcus said, his voice still calm, still controlled, still building his case. I've complied with every order you've given. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't made a threatening gesture. This arrest is without probable cause, without evidence, and without legal justification. And this is my vehicle. By now, people had started to notice. A couple in formal wear walking to their car, 30 feet away, stopped and stared. The woman pulled out her phone. A man in a suit jacket and bow tie who'd been loading gifts into his trunk turned and started recording. Near the hotel entrance, another woman in an evening gown saw what was happening, gasped and pointed. Then the hotel's main doors opened wide and 3 men walked out quickly. Marcus's groomsmen, all wearing matching tuxedos with gray vests. They'd come looking for him when he didn't return after 10 minutes. They'd expected to find him having a phone conversation or helping someone with directions. Instead, they saw their friend, a federal judge, handcuffed next to his own car. "Marcus," one of them called out, his voice sharp with confusion and alarm. "What the hell is going on?" They started walking faster, almost running. Sullivan tensed immediately, his hand moving to his weapon in a gesture that made the threat clear. "Stay back," Sullivan ordered, his voice hard. "This doesn't concern you. This is police business." "Police business? That's Judge Thompson," one of the groomsmen said, stopping about 10 feet away but keeping his hands visible. "That's the groom. This is his wedding. What the hell are you doing?" "The groom?" Sullivan looked at Marcus again, then at the 3 men in matching tuxedos, then back at Marcus. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his face, but doubt wasn't enough to stop him. He'd committed. Backing down now would mean admitting he was wrong. "Officer, I'm David Chen, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the District of South Carolina," one of the groomsmen said, pulling out his federal credentials and holding them up. "That man you have in handcuffs is Judge Marcus Thompson, United States District Court. He's the groom. We just watched him get married an hour ago. This is his wedding reception. That's his vehicle, registered in his name. You need to release him immediately." Sullivan took the credentials and examined them carefully, looking for any sign they were fake. The credentials were real. The hologram was legitimate. The seal was authentic. He looked at the ID photo, then at David Chen's face, then back at the credentials. His face went from confident to confused to pale. But instead of unlocking the handcuffs and apologizing, he doubled down. The classic move of someone who can't admit they're wrong. "I received a call about suspicious activity in this parking lot. I'm conducting a lawful investigation. If this man is who you claim he is, we'll verify that at the station and sort everything out there." "Sort it out at the station?" another groomsman said, his voice rising with anger. "You've handcuffed a federal judge at his own wedding. A federal prosecutor just identified himself and told you who this is. You need to uncuff him right now before this gets worse." More people had gathered now. The couple who'd first noticed was recording on their phones. 2 more cars had stopped. People were getting out, pulling out phones, watching. A woman in a long purple bridesmaid dress ran back toward the hotel entrance, clearly going to alert everyone inside. Sullivan looked around at the growing crowd. Dozens of people in formal wear, watching, recording. Many of them clearly guests at a wedding reception. The doubt on his face deepened into something like panic, but he'd committed to this course of action. He couldn't back down now without looking foolish, without admitting he'd made a catastrophic mistake based on nothing but racial profiling. "Everyone step back. I'm conducting a lawful investigation of suspicious activity." He started walking Marcus toward his patrol car, one hand on Marcus's arm, moving quickly now, trying to get this situation away from the growing crowd of witnesses. Marcus didn't resist. He walked calmly, his head up, his voice loud enough for everyone in that parking lot to hear clearly. "I am Judge Marcus Thompson, United States District Court. I'm being arrested at my own wedding by Officer Sullivan. This officer was told my identity by a federal prosecutor. He was shown federal credentials. He was offered multiple ways to verify everything I've told him. He's proceeding with this arrest anyway. Everyone here is witnessing this. Please record everything." Sullivan opened the back door of his patrol car and guided Marcus inside with more force than necessary. As he closed the door, the hotel entrance burst open again. A woman in a white wedding dress ran out, the dress's train trailing behind her, her veil flying. Dr. Alicia Thompson had been told her husband was being arrested. She ran across the parking lot in her wedding gown, her maid of honor following close behind trying to hold the train, dozens of other guests streaming out of the hotel entrance behind them. Should officers be required to verify claims about judicial or federal positions before making arrests? Let me know what you think. "That's my husband," Alicia shouted, still 20 feet away. "What are you doing?" "That's my husband." Sullivan held up his hand. "Ma'am, stay back. Stay back. That's Judge Thompson. That's my husband. We just got married." She gestured at her wedding dress, at the 50-plus people now gathered in the parking lot, at the absurdity of what was happening. One of the groomsmen had already called 911. Another had called the police chief's direct line. Within 3 minutes, 2 more patrol cars arrived. A sergeant stepped out of one of them, took one look at the scene, a man in handcuffs in the back of Sullivan's patrol car, a woman in a wedding dress crying, a crowd of people in formal wear with their phones out, and walked directly to Sullivan. "Sullivan, what's going on here?" "Responded to a call about suspicious activity, Sarge. Suspect was attempting to access a vehicle. He claims it's his car and he's some kind of judge, but—" "He is a judge," David Chen interrupted, walking over with his credentials out. "I'm Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chen. That man in your patrol car is Judge Marcus Thompson, United States District Court. He's the groom. This is his wedding. That's his vehicle. Your officer was told this multiple times and proceeded with the arrest anyway." The sergeant's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally, resignation. He walked to the patrol car and looked in the back window at Marcus, still handcuffed, still calm, wedding ring visible on his finger. "Jesus Christ," the sergeant muttered. He opened the door. "Judge Thompson?" "Sergeant," Marcus said calmly. "I'm going to get these cuffs off you right now. I'm so sorry. I don't even have words for this." He pulled out his keys and unlocked the handcuffs. Marcus stepped out of the patrol car, rubbing his wrists. Deep red marks ringed both wrists where the metal had dug in. Alicia ran to him and wrapped her arms around him. She was crying. The sergeant turned to Sullivan, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "You arrested a federal judge? At his wedding?" "I was responding to a call, Sarge. You were told he was a federal judge. You were shown credentials from a federal prosecutor. You had 3 witnesses in tuxedos telling you this was the groom. And you arrested him anyway. Give me your badge and weapon. You're done for tonight." Within 10 minutes, the police chief arrived. Then the mayor. Then 3 city council members. Everyone who mattered in Charleston law enforcement and city government was suddenly in that parking lot, looking at 150 wedding guests, multiple video recordings, and a federal judge with handcuff marks on his wrists on what should have been the happiest day of his life. The police chief approached Marcus and Alicia. "Judge Thompson, Dr. Thompson, on behalf of the Charleston Police Department, I sincerely apologize. This is unacceptable. We will investigate this immediately." Marcus looked at him with the calm, measured expression of someone who'd spent 2 decades in courtrooms. "Chief, I appreciate the apology, but this isn't about apologies. This is about a pattern, and that pattern is going to be addressed. Should officers face criminal charges for false arrests of federal officials? Drop your answer." The videos went viral within hours. Multiple guests had recorded the entire incident from different angles. Marcus standing by his car in a tuxedo. Sullivan approaching with his hand on his weapon, the handcuffs, Marcus being put in the back of the patrol car, Alicia running across the parking lot in her wedding dress. The growing crowd of witnesses in formal wear. Federal judge arrested at his own wedding. Black judge handcuffed by white officer who didn't believe he owned a Mercedes. Groom arrested in parking lot while wife watches in wedding dress. The hashtag spread like wildfire. By Sunday morning, every major news outlet in the country had picked up the story. By Monday, it was international news. The optics were devastating. A federal judge in a tuxedo, handcuffed at his own wedding, while his wife stood crying in her wedding dress. The U.S. Department of Justice issued a statement condemning the arrest. The federal judiciary issued its own statement expressing outrage. Civil rights organizations called for immediate action. Legal advocacy groups demanded accountability. The investigation into Officer Derek Sullivan took less than a week. Internal Affairs reviewed his record and found what anyone paying attention had known for years. 8 complaints, all involving racial profiling, all documented, all ignored. The pattern wasn't subtle. It was blatant. Sullivan had targeted black people in expensive cars and upscale neighborhoods again and again, and the department had done nothing. Officer Derek Sullivan was terminated 7 days after the incident. The termination letter was brief and final. Officer Sullivan arrested a federal judge without probable cause, based solely on racial profiling. Despite 8 prior complaints documenting a pattern of discriminatory conduct, Officer Sullivan continued to target individuals based on race rather than evidence. His conduct is incompatible with law enforcement service. Termination is immediate. Sullivan's name was entered into the National Decertification Index. His law enforcement career was over at 29 years old. But termination wasn't justice. Judge Marcus Thompson had been handcuffed and arrested at his own wedding, in front of his wife, in front of his family, in front of 150 guests. The photos and videos were everywhere. The humiliation was permanent. The lawsuit named Officer Derek Sullivan, the Charleston Police Department, and the city of Charleston. The claims were extensive and damning. False arrest without probable cause, unlawful detention, violation of federal civil rights, racial profiling and discrimination, excessive use of force, tight handcuffs causing physical injury, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and supervisory failure to address a documented pattern of racist policing. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence. The videos from multiple angles, the witness statements from 150 guests including federal prosecutors, state judges, and prominent attorneys. Sullivan's record of 8 prior complaints. The department's failure to take action. The optics of a federal judge in a tuxedo being handcuffed at his wedding. The case was indefensible. The city settled within 8 months. The settlement amount was unprecedented. $5.8 million paid to Judge Marcus Thompson and Dr. Alicia Thompson. The largest civil rights settlement in Charleston's history. The settlement included additional provisions, a formal public apology from the city and police department, mandatory bias training for all officers, a civilian review board with subpoena power to investigate complaints, automatic desk duty for any officer with 3 or more complaints related to racial profiling, and quarterly reporting to the Department of Justice on stop and arrest patterns. Should cities be required to pay punitive damages when officers with documented complaint histories commit civil rights violations? Let me know in the comments. Judge Marcus Thompson testified before the Charleston City Council 3 months after the incident. The council chamber was packed. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls. Local and national media covered it live. Marcus spoke without notes. His voice was calm, measured, and devastatingly clear. I'm a federal judge. I've served in law enforcement as a prosecutor. I've spent my entire career in the justice system. I understand the law. I respect police officers. I know the difficult job they do. He paused. But on my wedding day, an officer looked at me, a black man in a tuxedo standing next to my own car, and saw a criminal. He ignored the tuxedo. He ignored my explanation. He ignored 3 federal prosecutors telling him I was a judge. He ignored my wife in her wedding dress begging him to stop. He arrested me anyway because his bias was stronger than the evidence in front of him. Another pause. The room was silent. This wasn't Officer Sullivan's first complaint. It was his ninth. 9 times, he targeted black people based on assumptions rather than evidence. 9 times, the department did nothing meaningful. They gave him training. They gave him warnings. They gave him chance after chance. And he kept doing it because there were no real consequences. He looked directly at the police chief. I'm a federal judge. I have resources. I have a platform. I have colleagues who witnessed everything and will testify. But what about the people who don't have those things? What about the black men who get profiled by Officer Sullivan or officers like him and don't have federal credentials? What about the people whose arrests don't make national news? His voice hardened. This department had 9 opportunities to stop Officer Sullivan. 9 complaints documenting a pattern of racist policing. You failed 9 times. You failed me. You failed my wife. And you've been failing this community for years. He held up his wrists. The marks from the handcuffs were still faintly visible. These marks faded in a few days. But the message this sent? That doesn't fade. The message is, your credentials don't matter. Your profession doesn't matter. Your innocence doesn't matter if you're black and someone decides you don't belong. The room erupted in applause. Council members looked uncomfortable. The police chief stared at the table. Should police departments face federal oversight when they fail to address patterns of discriminatory policing? Drop your answer. This wasn't just about one officer or one arrest. This was about a system that ignored 9 complaints. A department that protected an officer with a documented pattern of racial profiling, and a culture that taught Derek Sullivan he could target black people without consequences. Officer Sullivan saw a black man next to a Mercedes, and his brain did the rest. The tuxedo was a disguise. The wedding ring was fake. The calm explanation was a lie. The federal prosecutors defending him were confused. The bride in the wedding dress was part of the con. His bias was so complete that no amount of evidence could penetrate it. When a federal judge, someone who literally wears the robe of justice, who took an oath to uphold the Constitution, who has spent 22 years working in the legal system, can be arrested at his own wedding because an officer can't imagine that a black man belongs near a Mercedes. What message does that send? It says no credential is enough, no achievement is enough, no explanation is enough. Your education doesn't protect you. Your profession doesn't protect you. Your innocence doesn't protect you. Derek Sullivan's career is over. That's consequences. The city paid $5.8 million. That's accountability. The department implemented reforms. That's progress. But none of that gives Marcus and Alicia Thompson back their wedding day. None of that erases the humiliation of being handcuffed in front of family and friends. None of that removes the videos that will exist forever. Do departments finally remove officers after 3 complaints instead of waiting for 9? Do supervisors finally take complaints seriously instead of filing them away? Do we finally acknowledge that racial profiling isn't just a few bad apples? It's a pattern protected by a system that prioritizes defending officers over protecting communities? Because if we don't fix the system that kept Sullivan on patrol through 9 complaints, if we don't address the culture that taught him to see black people as criminals regardless of evidence, then we're just waiting for the next officer, the next victim, the next wedding destroyed, the next life interrupted by assumptions disguised as law enforcement. Comment if you believe this should be law. Officers with 3 or more sustained complaints for racial profiling should face automatic termination and entry into the National Decertification Index. And if you think these stories matter, if you believe that accountability requires awareness and change requires pressure, then hit that like button and subscribe. We're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing these patterns. We're going to keep demanding better. We're going to keep fighting for the judges, the grooms, the everyday people who deserve to exist without being criminalized for the color of their skin. This isn't just about one officer or one judge. It's about all of us and the justice system we're willing to accept.